Dobar den. Well, now I have to skip to English, so I apologize for that, but like it was already said, my name is Pivk and I'm coming from TRIGLAV osiguruvanje Skopje after 20 years working in financial industry in Slovenia. In July last year, I moved to Skopje to become executive director in TRIGLAV osiguruvanje, and I must admit that I'm glad to be a part of the successful story in Macedonian insurance market. Of course, in contrast to my predecessor speakers, controlling is not my life. So that's why I was assigned a little bit different task, and this task is about operational planning. But of course, I have to admit that as well controlling, as well operational planning are one of the two major important factors in every successful company. So today, I apologize for that. Yeah, so like I said, I will try to give you a general overview about operational planning, but of course, due to the time constraints, and I guess that you're all already hungry, I will try to be as fast as possible. So what are the topics that I will try to cover? After the short introduction, I will try to put the focus on the planning process, the budgeting, the benefits of operational planning, and of course at the end about the limitations of planning. So, what are the main characteristics of operational planning? Operational planning is a short-term, highly detailed plan that is meant to achieve or implement strategic objectives. Like I already said, it's a short-term goal and it's not a long-term goal like in the case of strategic plan, which is normally focused on, let's say, 3 to 5 year period. Who's responsible for the operational plan? It's obviously its top and middle management. But of course, we cannot avoid the strategic objectives of single companies. So that's why, let's say, the flows should flow directly for the operational planning should flow directly from the organization's strategic plan. We all know how the planning goes, so obviously we know that normally we start to plan, let's say, before the year end, normally, let's say, in the middle or at the end of the third quarter. Which are the answers that operational planning should give? There are a couple of them which are mentioned on the slide. Sorry. Okay, so what are the main answers? First of all, what are the objectives? Second, what should the action plan look like? Who's responsible for implementing the operational planning? What is the time frame? And at the end, which is really important and a really important topic, this is a budgeting. So the financial means which enables us to implement the operational plan. We will devote a special short, let's say, chapter to this specific area. So I already mentioned some differences between, let's say, strategic plan and operational plan, and from this, let's say, picture, you can see what are the main differences, so I will not lose the time on it. So, what are the main steps in preparing the operational plan? First of all, we have to identify the major issues. So, a certain operational analysis is needed. Next step is defining the specific measurable results, so short-term objectives. Next step, the third step, are the key results areas. So, broad categories within which results must be. So we all know we work in different industries, but we all know what are the major topics of our plans. So revenues, sales, quality, financial flows, productivity, whatever. Key performance indicators. So we have to measure. So we have to measure and we have to track our performance and how good we are. Of course, we have to develop action plans. So how to achieve, let's say, the set goals. And of course, at the end, again, we are stick with the budget. So financial means that enables us to achieve, let's say, the required result. Of course, again, we are stick with the question of budget. And if we just read the definition, the budget is quantitative expression of the proposed plan for a specific period. So incomes, cash flows, and financial position. I will not read the whole picture because it's quite clear and obvious, and I think that we all meet with the same, let's say, process in our operational planning process. So, budgeting. What should the budgeting include? Of course, the budget period, the participants, and of course, the basic steps in budgeting. Normally, we all make a budget plans for 1 year period. Of course, it can be different as well. And to say what are the most common models in budgeting process, I think that we already met with three most common approaches. So top-down approach, bottom-up, and a combination of two, which is the most common and probably most desirable. On the next slide, there is a more detailed description of all three models, and I would not lose time on it. Maybe I would just say what I said just before. So a combination approach is probably the most convenient, the most common, and because it provides a balance between strategic and tactical inputs. So, in preparing the budget, there are also, or again, some steps. I mentioned just a couple of them, which are the most clear, the most obvious. So, the initial budget proposal, budget negotiation. This is probably the most pleasant task that we always have. So we have to negotiate between ourselves with the bosses. So how the budget for, let's say, specific area, specific department will look like. Review and approval. And of course, sometimes there is also revision. I think that we all already met in our careers with the cases where we have to revise our budget. So I know that this picture looked quite confused, but don't be afraid, please, because it's quite obvious. If you look from the left side, there are, let's say, authorities which are, let's say, involved in the budgeting process. In the middle of the picture, there are, of course, necessary steps to become, or let's say, to achieve the final version of the budget. And of course, at the end, on the right hand side, there is a phase how to realize this, let's say, approved budget. So, what are the characteristics of the successful budgeting process? A budget must be approved with a corporate strategy. This is #1 requirement. Of course, we know who's responsible for, let's say, accepting and, let's say, running the approved budget. This is, of course, the management. Normally is also the practice that when we agree on a certain budget, a higher authority must approve it. Either be the management board, either supervisory board, depends on the institution or organization, of course. Of course, a normal technical requirement is that numbers must be correct and accurate. This is normal, of course. Another thing is, of course, control of the budget. We must all, let's say, establish right ways, right tools to control, let's say, the budget. Of course, at the end, if, let's say, the budget or the plans are successfully implemented, of course, there must also be a reward. A budget is, of course, is a planning, communication, and coordinating tool, and in a way also the motivation tool for the employees. So, the benefits of operational planning, now we are moving away from the budget, of course, is that it provides a clear picture of tasks and responsibilities over a certain period of time. It allows us to check that these tasks are in line with the strategy and the objectives of the strategy. It supports coordination and communication throughout the company. Of course, there are certain measurement tools as well. So a tool how to measure or to judge the performance. And it helps managers to gather information to improve future performance. In a way, we all say that operational plan, of course, is a certain, let's say, management tool. At the end, of course, in life, everything is changing. In life, not everything is really good and nice. So there are certain limitations with the planning. And I must definitely warn you, or I think that the managers should be aware of potential difficulties and limitations with the planning. First of all, there is uncertainty. We all know in what kind of world we live. So definitely planning is not easy. Also, it's really time-consuming and costly. We all know how much time we spend to prepare, let's say, a good and finally approved, let's say, operational plan and budget as well. Rapid changes are taking place all the time. So another way how it makes our position even more unpleasant and uncertain. So this is another factor that we must be aware of. And sometimes also inflexibility. We all probably came into the situation where we said, plan is this, whatever happens, we will stick to it. This is not good. Sometimes, what I said before, a revision must be done. So, I hope that I was quick enough that you will be able to get some lunch. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. And with this wordings, I finish with my presentation.